Hi there, and welcome to the first in the series of our HashiCorp Partner Masterclasses. These sessions are going to be run over the course of the next few weeks in the run-up to our HashiConf EU event in June. In these masterclasses, our aim is to provide you, our growing partner ecosystem, with the opportunity to engage with, hear from, and connect with our own field organization, to hear the messages that we're taking to market and understand the nuances, real-world stories, and battle scars that we're learning from ourselves. My name's Mark Mason. I have the pleasure of leading our indirect efforts here in EMEA at HashiCorp. And I hope to ensure that through these sessions, we help not only to ensure that you can see the clear opportunity to position, sell, and deliver HashiCorp technologies to your customers, but also to be able to build a very real and ongoing business for the future with HashiCorp. These sessions are for any field-facing, sales-focused people within any of our partners who are discussing with customers and prospects about using any of our HashiCorp stack to deliver applications and services in a new, more agile and secure manner, with you being able to sell and then subsequently deliver services and ongoing value to ensure renewal and expansion. Today, we're joined by Nico Correo, one of the EMEA founding fathers who's been here at HashiCorp now for around 4 years. Nico is going to take us through the HashiCorp stack as a whole and the transformational journeys that many of our customers are on before we take a deeper dive in the coming weeks into more depth around the specific tools and messages we're taking to market. There will be a live Q&A at the end of this session, and I look forward to working with you all as we continue this exciting growth across the EMEA region. Nico, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank Mark for asking me to participate of this and giving me the opportunity to brief you a little bit about how HashiCorp tooling, both in sort of its open source variants and its commercial variants, can really help in your projects drive innovation. As we tend to say here, infrastructure enables innovation, and that is exactly what we're going to try to do here. So let me guide you a little bit today about what we call the cloud operating model and how we can actually apply it and use some of the HashiCorp capabilities in order to enable, well, pretty much any kind of project, because infrastructure is basically the wireframes of whatever project you are going to get engaged on. Before we start, very brief overview about HashiCorp in case you didn't know. We are a rather young company, but we are fortunate enough to be a commercial partner for 8 out of the top 10 in the Fortune list, as well as 125 in the Fortune 500. You may have heard of some of the tools that we build, which logos are there. It's not an exhaustive list, as we have added a few as we have gone by. But let me tell you ultimately what these tools means and why these tools were created. If we look at what we have seen in the market over the past probably 5 to 10 years, we have found that digital transformation has really created a need to increase velocity of delivery of systems. And when I say delivery of systems, basically these are the systems that mostly your customers, whether internal or external, are going to interact with your organization. As it stands, what we see that traditional systems of records, which generally don't create any competitive differentiation for organizations, tend to remain in the static data center and tend to continue to be managed with traditional practices. Whereas every system that is sort of front of the house facing or customer facing, depending on your situation, tends to run on sort of new and interesting compute platforms, where that is in sort of a private cloud environment or in a public cloud environment, or using actually a combination of both, that have a couple of specific defining characteristics. The first one is the method that we interact with them. Whereas traditionally in the data center, we used to just interact with the systems through what I tend to call caretakers. So specific teams that basically manage those systems and maintain those systems over time. And we have pretty much a ticket queue system where, in a first in, first down kind of way, requests are served and then potentially passed on to another ticket queue. these systems tend to be more on the self-serve category. If I need a compute resource, if I need spindles, if I need a database, I can just go and interact through either an API or a portal and get a somewhat immediate response in terms of I need compute. You can get compute provision in maybe, I don't know, 30, 45 seconds, 5 minutes. Whereas traditionally, if I take the example of a hosting company I used to work in, this used to take 6 days. The other interesting aspect about these systems is whereas in the data center, we had to maintain some level of predictable load because we could only serve as many workloads as physical limitations allowed us to do. We can only get so much physical space to rack servers, so much cold air pumped in, so much power, so much ultimately tin that we can procure and get racked and installed and serving customers. These new compute platforms tend to create this sort of idea of a boundless resource. It's completely scale out. So we can start small. Within 30 seconds, we can scale to accumulate a massive spike in load, and then we can scale down back again. Now, as you can imagine, sort of the traditional practices and mostly the systems of coordination, as I tend to call, that we have used in the past to manage application lifecycle in the traditional data center don't really apply to this modern dynamic data center. So I'm going to try to add a few sort of experiences from our customers so you can maybe start relating some concepts. But let me start with one of my favorites, which is a digital marketing company in France. This is a clear example of how these scale-out systems need completely different practices in terms of managing themselves. Now, Criteo, as you can imagine, does digital marketing, which means that at any time, they need to be ready to accommodate a load that is completely unpredictable, because we're talking about how many ads get served in pages. So Criteo needed to sort of start their architecture in a way where they couldn't just go and add servers to load balancers. They couldn't have systems where you needed to go through ticket queues in order to change the load profile. And that's why Criteo has been using Console Enterprise for about 2 years. Now, this is one of the complexities, but we tend to define 4 specific complexities that we find when adopting this modern data center concept. And we find challenges in these 4 categories, which, funny enough, as you will see soon enough, or as you may know, align to 4 specific products that HashiCorp ship. When it comes to provisioning, we went through from managing dedicated servers, where that is physical or virtual, to having that on-demand capacity I was talking about. I need more compute. I can go on provision a VM. I can go on, scale a replica state in a container orchestrator. When it comes to security, we went from rather static perimeters where we have predictable network rules. Like if I put something in perimeter A, it can talk to port 3306 or 5432 on perimeter B, to a model where applications can be running anywhere. And I actually need to grant and broker access to inter-systems regardless of which part of the network they're being hosted into. Same thing with networks. We cannot just trust existing subnets. The concept of IPs and subnets and ACLs doesn't really apply to this model where workloads can appear in any country, in any data center. So we need to base our traffic profiles and our access rules on actual service names. And we need to have a network map that is not based on IP, but rather based on which service can talk to each other or not. And ultimately, when it comes to sort of running applications, we're going from a model where we had a sort of one application, one machine pinning to a model where applications are just scheduled across a rather diverse fleet. And I need a single interface to push an application to run. And ultimately, I need a scheduler that is going to guarantee that I'm going to have the most efficient use of my diverse compute. Sort of going into that example and taking with Volt, ABN AMRO, which is a well-known bank in the Netherlands, have been migrating these systems of engagement to Kubernetes clusters. So ultimately, there is no concept of networks anymore. These Kubernetes clusters are running in either overlay networks, but somewhat flat networks. So each application has its own trust model, and we're going to identify each application and give broker access to whatever system they may need in order to run. And that is what they're doing with Vault. Now, as I mentioned, we basically took these 4 problems and we honestly took a stab at solving each one of these problems with a tool and a capability we have designed. They are not alone in the market, but unlike some other tooling that is available on the market, it's not really cloud specific. It's not really bound to a specific compute platform, but our sort of idea from conception is create this common control plane for any application running in any infrastructure. What you'll somewhat notice with any private or public cloud platform is effectively that their tooling, their capabilities cover you from the point of ingress to the point of egress, and everything in the middle, but nothing outside. And what we tend to see in most organizations is that actually infrastructure and applications in general are way more diverse and don't fit within a single perimeter. So if I may bring sort of one of the last cases and almost going back very interestingly to these points, we have one of the best sports retailer, in my opinion, in France. I actually have a lot of their gear. But ultimately, this was the problem they were having. In case you're not aware, Decathlon operates in a large number of countries, and they needed a consistent approach to deploy infrastructure in different cloud platforms in different countries. And their sort of development cadence, and I'm not talking about sort of digital platforms, I'm talking about products, are really, really fast, and they need their IT to respond at that speed. That's ultimately why when you look at sort of the application lifecycle delivery, we see that one of our products have a specific function in each cycle of this delivery, from testing infrastructure where you are creating a test environment in your own machine with Vagrant, as I used to do back a while ago, to packaging AMIs for my applications or for my scheduling environments, to provisioning the infrastructure that is going to run, managing the runtime, connecting the services to each other, and ultimately securing them, which, as you can see here, we put at the center. This is pretty much the approach that Roblox took about 3 years ago. Roblox is the perfect example of one of those companies that have, it's very cloud native. Its experience is 100% digital. It has thousands and thousands of consumers around the world. And, they need to be able to schedule in and out the load. And they need to do it in platforms that are as close to the consumer as possible to minimize latency. And that's why they chose Nomad, which is very operationally simple, but allows to have that federation at that scale to, countless geographical locations with a single interface. So let me go a little bit into detail into these products and what we were trying to sort of accomplish. The key idea about Terraform, it's rather simple. It's having a predictable way to define your infrastructure as code, as text that can be evaluated. And then basically, through a system present in Terraform, you can just do apply, and you can sort of evaluate your change, and you can do an apply. You can go and apply this change. And this has been extremely useful for a large community of thousands of users. But what organizations have been constantly demanded from HashiCorp is a consistent workflow in terms of how to do this at scale. It's absolutely fantastic that a developer can grab a binary and go and deploy infrastructure. But when it comes to doing this in an organizational environment, there are other complexities, there are other challenges that we need to take into consideration. For example, how do we provide the right guardrails in order for a developer to actually deploy infrastructure as fast as they can, but at the same time don't put the organization at regulatory compliance risk? How do we provide cost control? How do we provide a bit of an understanding into the developer that if they change this, this scale count from 3 to 5, that cloud bill is going to increase by 2 or by 3. How do we enable people to do self-service where potentially they don't have the skill or the interest into writing Terraform code and defining what the infrastructure should look like, because certain application owners don't need to do that? And how do we provide a single workflow? And that's ultimately what we have, initially provided to the market in Terraform Enterprise, and later on and available today, even for free on the initial tier with Terraform Cloud. What we're trying to do here, and this is potentially where it's going to provide a lot of value in your projects. We want to switch that mindset where the problem ceases being how to manage, state files, or how many pipelines do I create, or manage S3 buckets to store state and whatever, to simply and concisely deploying infrastructure, which is ultimately what our customers want to do. They don't want to handle the overhead of managing thousands of pipelines in terms of how this is consumed around the organization. They just want to write code and deploy infrastructure. They want to stop with trial and error deployment. They don't want a development cycle for infrastructure where someone spends 10-15 minutes doing a change just to hit an API limit. They want collaborative policy workflows, and that's what Terraform Enterprise and Terraform Cloud allow you to do. They don't want expensive cloud mistakes. They want insight at the time of change when Terraform does this plan to understand how much this change is going to actually impact my budget. And ultimately, and most importantly, they don't want ticket queues. They don't want any kind of friction. They want self-service infrastructure. They want simple onboarding. And that's ultimately what we are enabling with the commercial product of Terraform, that is Terraform Enterprise or Terraform Cloud. Now, when it comes to security, Vault is at this point an extremely known and widely used tool in, I would probably say, any industry, finance, telco, manufacturing, healthcare, you name it. And the key idea of Vault is, before it was rather simple. We had a self-contained perimeter where an application had access to the database, and that's it. But then we go to that perimeter not existing anymore, and we have multiple identity planes, multiple applications running on different perimeters, different clouds with different authentication methods, and of course the need to sort of maintain the integrity of information as information flows through these applications, or potentially even different compute platforms. And what Vault is proposing here is very simple. Instead of having, as we traditionally had in the data center, a ton of unmaintained service accounts that are created for specific applications, just-in-time access through what we call identity brokering. If you're an application, we are going to be able to go to a particular identity plane, validate that identity, and then just grant you access based on policy to where you need to get access to. We want to go from perimeter-based security, where everything in this zone has access to that zone, to a very granular service access, where based on what kind of application you are or what do you need to do, I'm going to have policy pre-written that is going to broker access into whatever system you actually need to access. From inconsistent data protection, or this information gets encrypted in this way, or we're using a key here or a key there, or we're using a cloud service here or there, and now, when that information transcended that perimeter, I cannot read it or decrypt it anymore, to a single way of doing encryption in transit and at rest. And not only just using, new modern stuff like AAX, but actually looking into format preserving encryption, looking into tokenization, and looking at every sort of regulatory angle you may need to comply with. Ultimately, going from a compliance uncertainty, which is in where we find most organizations, to a full traceability of what got access to who, when. Complete assurance around having your data stored in a manner compliant with FIPS and potentially GDPR compliance. It would come as no surprise to you that, interestingly enough, Vault sort of created this new category when it comes to secrets management. And something that you may find interesting is as early as August 2020, as you can see in the report, Gartner defined secrets management ultimately as a category And as you can see here, and I took the liberty to blank out sort of the other brands out of respect for the competition, HashiCorp has ranked top in this newly created category that we believe we founded. Although I wouldn't agree that this is sort of something like something of a specialized or niche use case, because basically everyone is running applications, and every application needs some sort of privileged access to our system. So moving on up the stack, once we have these applications, running the infrastructure that we provision, obtaining credentials to access the system as they need to start talking to each other. They need to potentially start providing service proxies in order to grant access and load balance between different instances of applications that are running. There's a lot of complexity here. And this has been sort of, based on what I've seen in the last year, kind of the ultimate frontier, as Terraform and Vault adoption has been, well, pretty much very, very widespread, sort of getting to the point where we can treat the network in the same way as we have been treating the compute and security has been a challenge for most organizations. And the idea is quite simple. We want to stop sort of being in a situation where we have to keep carving perimeters and have firewalls with access control lists that are pretty much append only, because no one knows if we can take an IP out of a control list or a port for that matter, to an actual service mesh, a sort of overlay network that runs through proxies, where I don't need to worry about TLS. That is just, encryption in transport is just handled at the mesh level, where services are told if they can communicate with each other or not, regardless of what is their IP address. So what Console is ultimately enabling you to do is going from being in this situation where your application is running and you then need to wait 6 hours to raise a ticket to your network security team to open a port or whatever, to a more autonomous management. And I actually, the use of that word was very intentional. If you think of autonomous things like breathing, that's what we would like the network to be. We want to go out from append-only IP access control list to a service-based network access. I don't care which IP you're using right now. That is a completely ephemeral fact. What I care about is what kind of service are you, and ultimately, what else do you need access to? We want to go away from sort of certificate management at the service level. It's very complex. It creates long-winded certificates. It creates a lot of security risk when they go away to just transparent encryption that is handled in transport, where we don't need to care about sort of creating those certificates for thousands of microservices. We just have the mesh handle that. And ultimately, from troubleshooting issues at firewall levels, reading logs and putting net traces and so on, to very simple layer 7 observability. As the information is going through, sort of the proxies in the mesh, this information is flowing securely and in an encrypted manner. But we can use all the HTTP response codes and everything that is not encrypted in order to provide observability, so you can get immediate performance metrics around your service without the need of adding any extra complexity in the actual service. Lastly, and to conclude at least my part, and hopefully pass it over to Mark, let's talk about that sort of complexity around the runtime environments. What we are seeing today is basically different deployment teams and development teams just deploying in multiple infrastructures, multiple compute platforms, some being more efficient than others. And ultimately, this has been proven already. The idea of one machine, one service doesn't really scale. It creates a lot of inefficiencies in the consumption of compute. So the place where we want to take infrastructure is basically where there is a single scheduler, a single control plane, where you basically have an infrastructure team that feeds compute, and you have a development team that just consumes that compute. Nomad handles the bin packing. Nomad would accept any kind of workload, where that is a container, or it's a Java application, or a Python process, or anything that it needs to create sort of a ring-fence compute resource in order to run. Nomad would handle all that complexity, and just simply make the most efficient use of your compute. So where do we want to take infrastructure? Forget about a platform per application, forget about a Kubernetes cluster per application. We want a unified workflow in order for running all your services, where those are long-running services or batch or dispatch, single control plane. Nobody's going to find the right compute for you. We want to stop with the wasted compute cycles. We want bin packing, and we want cost optimization. No more management overhead, no 5 servers extra per application. We want a simple control plane that is running on a single service and is just providing this every scheduling feature you need in terms of federation, in terms of running on multiple clouds, in terms of scheduling. We want to go from sort of tedious capacity planning processes to automated scaling, where Nomad potentially goes and secures more compute as you need to scale. So hopefully this has given you a quick introduction in terms of what we are trying to bring to the market. Hopefully you're finding useful capabilities here to run on your projects. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Mark.
Thanks so much for that, Nico. Phenomenal insight into the HashiCorp stack and the value that we're providing to global customers and helping them to achieve new levels of efficiencies and automation across their infrastructure. So I'd like to take a few minutes now just to talk through some of the changes and the evolution of our partner ecosystem and how we can more effectively work together to maximize our mutual benefit and start to create a long-term sustainable business together. So with that, I'll share my screen. So for those of you that attended Partner Summit last year, we introduced the concept of partnering in a cloud operating model. We still believe that this model is the right model for the HashiCorp partner ecosystem, and that every opportunity that we are in will be dependent upon strong partnerships with our ISV technology partners, our cloud partners, and of course, our reselling and SI community. But we're now more than ever moving from an ecosystem with HashiCorp in the center to more of an ecosystem where actually our SI partners are right in the middle of what we're trying to achieve. Our SI partners are stitching together solutions for customer cloud implementation and adoption. And these SIs have tremendous customer institutional knowledge and relationships, and more importantly, the trust of our customers. Our SIs are the only player that can pull off the full orchestration required across ISV and cloud partnerships. Our cloud partners are heavily invested in our success because it drives consumption. The more we help our joint customers together to adopt HashiCorp solutions, the faster enterprises can make their transformation to the cloud quickly and securely. Never before has partnering together been so pivotal to customer success and meeting business outcomes. We ask you to join us in this journey to co-sell together by continuing to build your cloud practices and blueprints with HashiCorp Enterprise Solutions. Now, I can't think or recall too many other opportunities out there in the market where I've seen so much upside and cross-selling opportunity. All HashiCorp partners have the opportunity to position ourselves as a specialist in this high growth market. The partner opportunity with HashiCorp is one that is frictionless and ripe for taking advantage of the business you've already built. You most likely already have HashiCorp open source customers in the majority of your house accounts. You are the trusted advisors of the networking, security, and operations teams in those accounts. Introducing a HashiCorp roadmap discussion will help you open new opportunities both in selling licenses and cloud adoption or transformational services. In talking with our partners over the past couple of quarters, we're seeing a minimum of a 2x drag in cloud consumption and even greater services drag with HashiCorp Enterprise. Here at HashiCorp, we've invested so much in partnering with all of our partners to help drive this adoption that we've even implemented an incentive program internally to our sellers to bring SI partners into opportunities as early as possible to position your own cloud services. I'm sure that most of us are used to seeing very product-centric slides from vendors and how these products will yield transactional margin. So whilst, yes, you will make money, absolutely, on selling Terraform, Vault, Console, Nomad from a land and expand, but also a renewal perspective, the services opportunity is even more profitable for your organizations. When we look at this slide, most of our customers will require at least phase 1 and phase 2, where they're installing and integrating HashiCorp solutions. But many will also invest in phase 3 services as they continue to adopt HashiCorp across their organization by adding in governance and compliance, shared IT services, and ongoing staff augmentation. Couple the HashiCorp enterprise stack along with your services opportunities, and you're easily looking at high 6-figure and 7-figure customer lifetime value figures. So what now? What's next? What is the best way for us to engage together and start building opportunity and building pipeline? We here at HashiCorp are very happy to engage with all of you on enablement around how to position and how to best articulate the narrative around the HashiCorp enterprise stack. But when we have a think about the open source nature of our organization, we think back to actually over the course of the last 12 months alone, there have been well over 85 million downloads of our open source binaries. Many of these accounts will absolutely most likely be your enterprise house accounts. You can work with us, with our partner team, with our end user team to identify those accounts and start with a simple comment and a question. Something along the lines of, I understand you may be using some of HashiCorp's open source tools. Would you be interested in a roadmap discussion or a free health check and validation on how your open source designs and implementations are going? Together, we can have a look and help you to deliver that health check, help understand if the current implementation is best fit and fit for purpose. And we can start working with you on teaming agreements and joint pursuit plans around actually turning this into real opportunity. And finally, if you're building blueprints and landing solutions for cloud implementations, work with us here at HashiCorp to help validate and design enterprise into your architecture for longer, more secure and scalable multi-cloud frameworks. I invite each and every one of you to investigate your house accounts where any of those elements of the HashiCorp stack are being used, engage with us here and work with a successful co-sell motion. So with that, I'd like to say once again, a massive thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. I really appreciate, as we all do, the time, the energy, the effort from all of you to continue to be a part of this phenomenal growth trajectory that we're all enjoying. And with that, we'll open up for a live Q&A. Happy to take any questions and comments that there might be amongst us as a group. So thank you once again, and again, look forward to working with you in the future.
All right, thank you, Mark. So we've had a couple of questions come through on the chat now, and Nico, perhaps one better directed at you, first of all, is how do you see your offerings evolving going forward as more customers are looking for products in the cloud and as a service?
So it's actually quite interesting. Over the past, I'm going to say 6 to 12 months, we have been developing our managed service offering, and this is, back to the fact that most of these capabilities are actually designed to run as a central service that can be shared among a number of groups in the organization. Now, sometimes, and most of our customers have been these sort of large, Fortune Global 2000 companies that have the capabilities to run these services, but for smaller ones, that initial step has been a little bit steep in terms of getting the software running and getting a team potentially designed to run the software and so on. HCP Vault allows small teams to literally in a couple of clicks go and provision a Vault cluster that has been deployed to best practices and start consuming it to manage their secrets. Now, that doesn't mean at all that this sort of simplifies the adoption in an organization. It does simplify the
deployment on our organization. And what we are seeing even now in the incipient phases, we just released this product to market on the 7th of April, is that organizations are going to, you know, SIs that are already part of our partner program to look for guidance in terms of what are the patterns and how to adopt their current applications. So we have, you know, in answer to your question, Connor, we have definitely seen the cadence of adoption increase very, very rapidly. In my professional career, it's been the first time that people go from sort of evaluating the product on a day or maybe in beta to you know, put a purchase order for a product within the space of weeks. Definitely that's not my experience with enterprise software, but that is only the start of the journey, and there is a lot of knowledge that need to be shared with these organizations so they can be successful at adopting the product. So Connor, hopefully that answered the question.
Absolutely. No, thanks a lot, Nico. So Mark, perhaps a question better directed at you this time. We've had someone out there saying, I'm interested in becoming a partner. How do you measure performance and drive joint business with your partners in EMEA?
Thanks, Connor. Great question, and one that we get quite a lot, to be honest. So the important thing for us, and I mentioned it at the beginning of this session, is we want to make sure that we're building a long-term sustainable business with our partners. For us, the important things are looking like, you know, how do we create pipeline? How do we create consistent deal registration? How do we drive towards joint revenue? And then for all of our partners, obviously, we're looking at how we drive an effective services business over time. So the KPIs for us, again, clear, really: deal registration, pipeline, joint engagement, and driving pipeline activity. But we want to make sure that it's a two-way street, and we're putting clear metrics in place around how we drive execution and services delivery for our partners.
Okay, fantastic. And another one for you, Mark. I'm a partner with more traditional data center business, but we're building out a cloud competency and aligning closely with cloud providers. Can you support us in getting more skilled and driving enablement and joint engagement with our customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're finding is, you know, a lot of our customers and prospects are transitioning at this stage, right? And actually, a lot of our partners are doing exactly the same. So we have a lot of partners inside the community who may have had traditional data center or legacy hardware and software supply chain into certain customers. But there's a clear understanding that whilst our customers are transitioning, our partners have to do exactly the same. So we are driving across, you know, our field and our SE community a lot of activities around enablement and activation with our partners. So I would urge anyone on the call right now, if there's a clear requirement and you see the opportunity, reach out to either myself, Nico, or Connor, and we can work with you and your teams on what we're calling our partner activation program, where we go through a series of activities and enablements around all of our stack, whilst also driving a clear sales narrative and a technical narrative enablement. But then also interlinked with that is driving very clear pipeline and pipe generation activities as well. So whilst we go through a learning and enablement track, we're actually starting to build opportunity, which we can then deliver upon together once we've gone through that process.
All right, thank you, Mark. So I think that concludes the Q&A. So we'll wrap up the masterclass in that case. So as you can see on the screen, our next masterclass will be taking place on the 4th of May, and this will be looking at Terraform specifically. So what's new, things like Terraform Cloud, giving you some insight into the perfect pitch. We'll hear from some of our HashiCorp reps, and we'll be providing some customer references that you can use when engaging your customers as well. So just a reminder that this webinar was recorded, and we'll share that with you within the next 48 hours. And with that, I hope you enjoyed today's inaugural Partner Masterclass, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone.